Hello, and welcome to How Did You Get That? A podcast all about media literacy and pop culture. My name is Andrew Sutherland, and I'm a grad student who just generally studies media literacy. And let me introduce my guest, Alexandra Phil.
Hi, my name is Alexandra, and some of you, and by some of you I mean none of you, may know me as the happiest hackfish. I
Yes.
am the owner and creator of a blog that receives almost 10 views a day. And I love to talk about media and media literacy.
Yeah, and this is kind of like a brainchild that we kind of been talking about for a while about starting a podcast all about media literacy and trying to get the idea out there about like how to become more effective of it. And I specifically asked Alexandra because in my view, she's probably the best and most reliable source when it comes to pop culture.
That's very sweet.
Yes. Um, so I think we should start to figure out like this is kind of like a more rough draft right now. It's our first episode. And so I think we
Yeah.
need to figure out like generally what our vibe is. So our first few episodes are going to be really testing things out and getting used to the idea of what it means to make a podcast or whatever.
Yes.
Yes.
It's going to be a process, especially since, dear listeners, the podcasts that I usually listen to were Wolf 359 and the Babysitters Club Club.
Yeah.
This is new for me.
Yeah, and um, I think we should kick things off more specifically,
Yeah.
explaining why we are doing this podcast about media literacy. When people talk about media literacy, they mostly focus on the perceptions of media bias. This source is biased. No, that source is biased. But only thinking about bias completely neglects all the other elements about media literacy. And if we only concern ourselves about sources being biased, we become less self reflective on our own biases and become more cynical and less skeptical of the media that is not biased towards our own beliefs. In this sense, media literacy is more than just identifying bias, it's self reflective and helps us better understand who we are.
Yeah, I agree. So I heard this phrase a while back, and it's something that I like to use whenever I'm introducing the concept of media literacy to someone. And that is no media, so no TV show, no song, no book, no movie, is created in a vacuum. Everyone and everything is connected, and all media is created by a person. And every person, even the most well-meaning person, has opinions and has a past. And all of that informs our perspectives. So when you consume media, you are consuming somebody's opinions. And it's good to be mindful of that.
Yeah. And I come from a perspective mostly thinking about media literacy, not from the source to the audience, but the audience's engagement with the source. And that's kind of why we're also looking at pop culture. Pop culture is very accessible, it's very meaningful to a lot of people. But I think we also need to better understand what is media literacy because it's not just understanding the source, but it's also diving deeper into various other themes. According to namely the National Association of Media Literacy Education, media literacy comprises of five themes of access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act. And each of these five themes encapsulates many skills that people can borrow or use to become more media literate. It also shows that media literacy is not just this protectivist approach, but also teaches people how to make their own media and better understand who they are in relation to the media that they engage with. So, with this in mind, it's kind of my hope is that through each one of these episodes that we decide to do, we try to encapsulate one of those themes of access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act through pop culture, whether that is a film, music, books, or theater, or more. We will discuss a variety of communication theories also because both myself and Alexandra, we both are, well, Alexandra already graduated and she earned her master's in communication studies, and I'm
Mhm.
currently a PhD trying to earn my doctorate in communication studies. So here we'll
Yes, sir.
basically use, yeah, exactly. And we will basically use our knowledge to explain some of these phenomenons and identify some deeper meanings that we might come across in our media consumption. So, Alexandra, how confident do you feel that we could succeed with this podcast and promote media literacy?
Well, that's a wonderful question. But I would say I feel as though we have motivation and we have good reasoning for wanting to create this podcast. So I feel pretty confident about our ability to do so.
Yeah, and I think confidence should be the first major theme of this episode of our podcast, but more specifically,
Mhm.
the idea of self-efficacy. Self-efficacy, defined by Bandura, is more about confidence in one's ability to perform a task or skill. In particular, self-efficacy is essential for humans' motivation, affect, and action, and it operates through the idea of cognitive elements, motivational elements, and affective elements intervening within the process. So the idea that we become more confident through our skills can or our idea that we can perform a task can make us more likely to achieve these tasks. So, in the case of cognitive, it is more embodying the goals that influence our self appraisal or our capabilities. It can predict occurrences of events and create the meaning for existing control over those affects in our daily lives. In other words, if we can think it, we can probably do it. Self efficacy and cognitive stimulation affects others, and self efficacy or our beliefs can affect cognitive functions and influence the motivational and information processing. The other element is motivational, a reflection on how much effort that a person will exert in their endeavor and how long they will persevere in facing obstacles. If we feel like we can accomplish it, if we feel like we are confident in our abilities, we can probably do it. But we also have to recognize that self-doubt can reduce and has been shown to reduce self-efficacy. And the final element is affective or how we feel. How much stress or how we are feeling can expect that we experience during a threatening situation or a taxing situation may affect
Mhm.
our motivation or affect our self-efficacy or confidence to accomplish something. But also, our emotional reactions can both directly and indirectly alter our nature and the course of our thinking. People who feel like they are in control in a potential situation feel like they're less apprehensive and more likely to accomplish the task because they feel confident in it. And based on a person's actions on their perceptions of different types of coping efficacy,
Mhm.
they're more likely to feel more confident in their abilities while also reducing anxiety. But overall, the idea of efficacy when it comes to affective dimensions is more concerned on the impacts of coping efficacy as a basic biological system. So it has been shown that self-efficacy
Mhm.
has an impact on our mental health or mediated health functions. So exposure to stressors with our ability to control them has no adverse psychological effects if we feel confident in our self-efficacy to accomplish certain types of stressors.
So I have a brief question. Do you think you could summarize what you were just explaining to the audience, but in just a few short sentences, using the example of my secret dream, which is to be a puppeteer for the Jim Henson Company?
I love that dream. I think we both
Mhm.
absolutely love it. So, in the case of self-efficacy, if you
Mhm.
have the confidence to accomplish a task, you are going to be more likely to do that task. You're going to be more likely to perform it. This case, our judgments and personal efficacy can
Mhm.
be influenced by a situation. People tend to
Okay.
avoid activities or situations they believe that exceed their abilities, but they readily
Hmm.
undertake challenging activities and select social environments they judge themselves capable of handling. But people readily undertake challenging activities because we choose to self-limit. However, if we've developed these skills or if we feel confident in our own skills, we're more likely to overall seek out and do those types of activities that may be challenging. So in your case, wanting to be a puppeteer, if you have the confidence of doing it, you're more likely to take steps to achieve those successes.
It's interesting because I almost feel as though I could summarize self-efficacy a little bit as fake it till you make it.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. But yeah, it's been also used in a lot of different ways.
Hmm.
When it comes to our confidence in our own skills, we do not normally just do it. We don't normally just go about with just, oh, I feel confident, I'm going to do it. But rather, we
Hmm.
also learn from observations. We learn through
True.
observing others to get a better idea of how to perform a behavior or skill. And this is ultimately another theory based off of Bandura, social cognitive theory.
Hmm.
And it's been shown that through observation, we learn and develop confidence to perform certain tasks. We learn through observation it's about our values, norms, and many ways ourselves too. But another way we actually learn through observation and helps build up our confidence is through media. Bandura points out that media representations that is depicted through entertainment education can gain influence programs can gain influence because people's social constructs of realities can depend more on what they see or hear. And when they're engaging with entertainment television, um, or not I'm sorry, educational entertainment,
Hmm.
we start to develop self-modeling and vicariously learning through other people's experiences. And then, in that sense, if we feel a sense of connection with a character or we identify that character as being accomplishing a task, it can also build up our own self-efficacy.
Okay, so Andrew, you and I both have backgrounds in social sciences, so we understand the impact that Albert Bandura has had on our work. But for those who may be listening who are unfamiliar with him, do you mind explaining why we feel like he's so important?
Yeah, so our advisor, both myself and Alexandra, we went to the same grad program, and we both have the same advisor, Dr. Erica Austin. And she's
Mhm.
probably the biggest rock star when it comes to media literacy. And one of her goals, she went to Harvard, and was it Harvard or was it Stanford?
He went to
She went
Stanford,
to Stanford. Oh
Bay
boy.
Area represent.
Yes, she went to Stanford and she always wanted to study under Albert Bandura. Didn't get the chance to, but a lot of her theories on self-efficacy and social cognitive theory were based, or her research was based on those theories. And so a lot of it was driven, and in a lot of ways, our research is driven by social cognitive theory and self-efficacy.
Yes. Hmm.
So when
Yeah.
I think about developing confidence through pop culture, I think about specifically shows that are focused on educating their audience and building up their confidence to accomplish these tasks. And no
Okay.
show fits better, in my opinion, than Sesame Street.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Sesame Street character?
Oh my gosh. The fact that you need to ask me that
Yeah, I know.
shows that this is a new podcast that we're introducing to new people. So it's okay. That's a completely fair question. My favorite Sesame Street character, nay, not just Sesame Street character, but character in the history of the universe, is the Cookie Monster.
Yes.
The Cookie Monster is all id.
Mhm.
He is constantly driven by appetite, much like Count Orlok from film Nosferatu. Cookie Monster is also appetite.
Oh my God. Now I'm just hoping that one day, Jim Henson, the Jim Henson production company,
Mhm.
decides to go back and make uh, satirical movies and books about like famous like media and just does one of Nosferatu with starring the Cookie Monster as Nosferatu. Oh my God.
That would actually go pretty hard if all of the people were made of cookies.
Oh my goodness. Oh, who did Willem Dafoe play in the movie?
Willem Dafoe played the Van Helsing character, but
Yeah.
would he then be in in this one as well, just so
I
to establish continuity.
Well, that could make sense, but I was thinking that character's played by the Swedish chef. Borka borka bork.
Audience, you can't see this, but I am struggling to resist the urge to throw my laptop across the room because of how much I love that idea.
Yep. I mean, isn't that the meme where you get to choose any movie and you just replace all the characters except for one human with Muppets? And I think the only one that should be a human is what's her name? Rosie Depp or
Oh, she
Rose
should
Depp?
remain the one human.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I do like the thought of Kermit the Frog in Nicholas Holt's role. I feel like
Yes.
he would have been very good.
I'm
I just
loving
imagine
it.
his little froggy feet up against the wall, deciding whether or not to jump off into the water.
And he falls
Is
with
he
his
ever
hands like shaking in the air.
will he ever see his beloved again?
Exactly. So in
That's so
that case, when we think about Sesame Street, it was originally conceived in 1966 by Joan Gance Cooney and Lloyd Morissette from the Carnegie Foundation, where their goal was to create a child's television show that would, as they quote, master the addictive qualities of television and do something good with them. And then they premiered in 1969, and the show is still going on today.
yeah, it's a fantastic hit. I can actually speak a little bit about this because I recently read Jim Henson's biography, which I highly recommend. The first few chapters are a little slow, but once you get into the Sesame Street days, it's a great read. And these characters were crafted with so much love and care. Um, I think that's something that audiences may not be aware of, and it's something that I'm now more mindful of when I watch Sesame Street. But these characters, they come alive in the hands of their puppeteers, and once these characters come to life, then it becomes more clear with what kinds of questions and scenarios can we can we enact with these characters? What kinds of messages can we share with the audience because of who these characters have evolved into? And so, for instance, two of the characters I know we're going to talk about include Elmo and Big Bird, but
Yes,
don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
absolutely. Yeah. But like in of itself, yeah, there's a lot of love and care, and you see it within the show. Where the show's
Hmm.
goals for outreach was addressed during their first season by an extensive and innovative promotional campaign targeted at children and their families in predominantly low-income cities, homes,
Hmm.
because these groups tend to not watch educational programs on television, and because of traditional methods of promotion and advertisement wasn't as effective to them. The show Sesame Street is considered the gold standard of well-designed educational shows, as it is designed using educational theories and research and frequently analyzed for efficacy.
Hmm.
In the book, G is for growing. The authors point out that since the late 1960s, Sesame Street has been built on the firm of confidence building in young children's potential to succeed, ongoing research into the most effective ways to meet their challenging needs, and a constant strive to bring children to the best that educational media can offer. And in many ways, Sesame Street attempts to encourage children of all background to reach for a bigger, richer, and better worldwide. When we think about their research goals, it's more driven similarly to self-efficacy, predominantly looking at the cognitive goals and affective
Hmm.
goals, with initially focusing on cognitive goals while addressing affective goals indirectly, basically saying we want kids to believe in themselves through self-esteem while also feeling more competent.
Hmm.
In the case of cognitive, we're looking more at two goals were provided for the readers for trying to build up basic educational skills and teaching kids that both teaching children both what and how to think. While affective goals, they were used to ultimately more build up social competence, tolerance of
Mhm.
diversity, and a non-aggressive way to resolving conflict. And in many ways, the show also focuses on turning inward and expanding its young viewers' world.
I should be inputting so many thoughts here. I should be adding to what you have to say, but all I really want to say is, gosh, I just really like this show.
I I love it. And in all honesty, I hope David Zaslav decides to continue to re-sign their contract. Because let me be honest, I still love the show. I'm a
Mhm.
31-year-old man, and it still brings me so much joy to watch every so often.
I think it's wonderful that parents who grew up with this show now have the opportunity to watch it again with their children. And you can tell so much of the content, which we'll also go into, is clearly created to help build up the confidence of young children and also speak to the parents as well and give them a guide for how they can support their children.
Exactly. And as shown and mentioned in Carney and Levine's 2015 article, a meta-analysis about Sesame Street, they found that children who were preschool age in 1969 and who lived in areas with areas greater predicted of Sesame Street coverage because it was
Mhm.
originally aired on public broadcast, so not every area got it
Mhm.
were statistically significant more likely to be at grade level appropriate for their age, if not higher. So,
Really?
exactly. So this raises many questions on how can we apply the general idea of self-efficacy, media literacy to the idea of Sesame Street. What are your thoughts?
I have so many. Also, because I took so long to speak, it almost started to psych myself out. I was like, wait, do I have thoughts? Have I ever had a thought in my life? Uh, I do have thoughts. So can I think of like specific moments within the context of the show that have encouraged self-efficacy, or are we thinking more like broader?
Whatever you think, in all honesty, whatever you feel like would be the most appropriate way to go about with this.
Well, okay, here's this theory that I actually learned in anthropology that I think would be interesting to discuss very briefly. And it's this concept of the triangle in learning, specifically in learning between parents, children, and the object that's doing the learning. And I noticed that in Sesame Street, there's always going to be opportunities for this thing called the triangle. And that the idea is that the child is watching Sesame Street, the adult who's with them is likely also watching Sesame Street, and the child will regularly turn to the adults. They'll make eye contact and they'll share sort of like a connection over the content, over what they are watching on TV. And so there are so many moments in Sesame Street where that is possible, for these moments of connection, which are so wonderful, I think, for when you're learning and when you're, it's so important for learning as well as deepening a connection with your family. So Sesame Street provides that through its surprisingly clever content, that clearly has so many moments that are trying to shout out to the adults who are watching with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can come into other theories within communication studies like
Mhm.
co-viewing, which basically argues that when we ultimately watch media content with other people, it helps us dive into more conversations and get a deeper understanding of that media. So when we think about like media literacy and
Mhm.
parents or engaging with their kids, parents can ultimately take an opportunity to get the kids to start asking questions of the media that they engage with. What is the purpose of this media? Is it designed to persuade, inform, or is it trying to sell you something, or is it just strictly entertainment? And getting the kids to be a little bit more skeptical about advertisements too.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That is such an interesting point. And I do think that, occasionally there are some parents who are going to see the TV as an opportunity keep the child entertained while
Yeah.
they complete many of the tasks that they need to do. This is not my way of judging parents. Trust me, I would do the same thing.
Yeah.
But the wonderful thing that I think some parents actually miss out on an opportunity when when they're not really aware of like the importance of media literacy, is they miss out on an opportunity to connect with their child and to really create a conversation about what their child is watching. Like, I'm not saying you have to watch every episode of Blippi or Bluey or
It's
whatever your
Bluey.
kid is
It's well,
watching.
you should. It's great.
Uh,
It's up there with Sesame Street.
Blippi was the show that my friend's son was obsessed with.
Oh, I was thinking
Yes.
Bluey.
No, they are both shows. Yes, I agree. Bluey is a masterpiece. Blippi, I don't know if it counts as a masterpiece. I
Eh.
think it is just a loud show. Um, but it still creates opportunities for connection with your child and opportunities to see how your child is absorbing the world around them.
Yeah. And so when it comes to Sesame Street, it can help build confidence or build children's confidence into accomplishing tasks using likable characters, characters that could also be approachable, like Big Bird, Elmo, or Rosita, to show
Mhm.
kids how to do something. So let's kind of like apply the logic of various different episodes to kind of show how kids can ultimately, through the idea of self-efficacy, Sesame Street helps build up the confidence of children. And we kind of watched a few different episodes. I made some suggestions, and one in particular that I suggested was in 1972, where it was an episode all about, well, the first two scenes of Sesame Street of this episode is mostly focusing on vaccines. And the episode begins with Big Bird basically noticing a line out of Hopper's store and begins to ask, really, what's going on? What's happening? And it turns out there is a vaccination clinic being set up there, and it was specifically for the measles vaccine. And he meets Dr. Mazzullo, who is played by Madge Sinclair, and shows enthusiasm about getting vaccinated.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting, especially in it was so gosh, there's so much history going on within these old clips. And it was fascinating to see this time in which they genuinely were just trying to get the word out about the importance of vaccinating your children, because it seems like a lot of the families who might watch Sesame Street, for whatever reason, didn't quite have the ability or maybe not the knowledge that vaccinations were so important and so
Yeah.
beneficial.
And what's actually interesting about this is just the year prior, before this episode came out, um, a big thing happened when it came to vaccines. In 1971, just a year before the episode, the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine were combined into the measles, mumps, rubella (MMR) vaccine in the United States. So there was a bigger
Wow.
push to get people to get vaccinated at that time. So Sesame Street ultimately put together two short clips within their show
Hmm.
to get kids, not just excited, not going out of their way to get it, but getting them to be a
Hmm.
little bit more curious and potentially confident if their parents decide that they should get it. And the way it's best shown is within the second clip of the episode, where Louise and Antonio, two human characters, one Louise is a child, no, or wait, hold on, let me read my notes really quickly. I think
Hmm.
Louise, yeah, Louise uh, no, Antonio is the child. Oh boy, that's fun. Antonio's a child, and Louise is one of the main adults who basically runs Sesame Street. And they stop by and get their measles vaccine, where they show Antonio's a bit nervous. But after they show Louise getting his vaccine first, they have Antonio do kind of a count of five and to accomplish this task, and then they go on their merry way, basically the showing that the procedure is not that big of a hassle. Sure, it might be a little bit painful within the moment, but it's okay. And it's also okay to be nervous. And they show strategies to address those nerves. During this process, they also describe what's going on and why each one of these steps is important in this procedure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you said it very well. They're normalizing something. They're removing so much of the mystery that could have been behind getting a vaccination.
Exactly, but at the same time, let's think about kind of the flow of the appeal. Big Bird was
Mhm,
someone or a character who did it, and he is someone that the kids look up to and like. So it starts to pique the kids' interest. Then they see that Louise and Antonio is somebody who they might relate to or identify
mhm.
with, could instill the child's confidence in the idea that they are able to do it too without fear around it. However, we also have to acknowledge that these are episodes that are pretty short. They're not as diving deep into the information. They're just talking about like the procedure and what's going on. And that's because like at that time, Sesame Street and up until 2023, they did kind of
Mhm.
magazine styles of information where it's short bits, short clips. And it wasn't really designed to inform, but it was designed to show and build up confidence in their kids, and the kids.
Mhm. I do like that approach, though. I think there's something very natural about it.
Mhm.
Um, I like the idea of exposing someone to an idea without feeling the need to, say, turn it into a town hall.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm,
But then let's compare to 2020 with the COVID-19 vaccine. They
mhm,
don't show, in this case, Big Bird getting vaccinated, but they show him afterwards and having Big Bird's grandma, Granny Bird, explain why he did it, focusing on keeping Big Bird, his family, and his friends safe and healthy. Then there are also other similar segments too, where Elmo talks about getting the shot too. But they also include his dad, Lewis. Yeah, Lewis, where
mhm.
he basically makes a point that it's okay to ask questions. And talking about his nervousness about getting Elmo vaccinated too. Basically making the
Mhm.
point and instilling confidence that you can ask questions, you can be curious and dive deeper, not just as a kid, but Lewis is directly talking to the parents,
So that was interesting. And I assume we're
or
moving on to
Louis. His
the
name's Louis. I'm sorry.
Louis is the name of Elmo's dad.
Yeah.
Louis the soldier. Yes.
Yes.
Um, I had mixed feelings about the town hall. I see. Overall, I want to emphasize that I have the utmost respect for creators who are trying to demystify something that could seem scary, like a vaccination, especially a vaccination for a very frightening virus like COVID-19. So I want to emphasize that I understand they had a very difficult job, but I wasn't quite sure who the town hall was for.
Yeah.
So there were some moments where the town hall seemed to be directed at children, which is wonderful. Except a half-hour show is pretty long for children. Um, and they were asking quite a few questions that I don't think children would have. It seemed like at a certain point, the content of this town hall was supposed to be for parents. Parents were watching with their children, and that's also okay. But they did something with the kids that makes me feel extremely uncomfortable anytime I'm watching a show. And I don't like it when you can tell that children are being coached.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it would have been okay if the town hall had chosen to show the children and the parents asking the questions themselves, because I thought it was obvious that the parents are the ones with these questions, because when I was 5 years old, I did not care how a vaccine was developed. I just cared
Yeah.
if I was getting a sticker at the end or some kind of reward.
Exactly. And that's perfectly fair. I would say I definitely think the town hall episodes where they invited these experts to talk about it was meant for co-viewing approaches where they
Hmm.
ultimately have the parents basically talk with their kids afterwards more about that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And so that makes a lot of sense. I think it's interesting that I was so distracted by what I felt like was coaching children to ask questions that were maybe a little bit too advanced for them. For me, it definitely distracted me from some of the what I think the purpose of the town hall should have been. I think I don't necessarily think you need to have smiling researchers explain to children why the vaccine is important, but I do think that that kind of content would definitely been more appropriate for parents. I feel like I'm not expressing myself very well, but I'll just
No.
say that it left me feeling somewhat confused.
Yeah.
Uh, Actually, if I could compare it to another piece of media that emphasized the importance of the COVID-19 vaccine that I actually thought did a surprisingly good job at conveying the information about the vaccine with one distinct audience in mind, it would have been Seth MacFarlane's use of his Family Guy characters to explain the development of the COVID-19 vaccine and why it was important.
I need to see that. I have not seen that.
Yeah, Seth MacFarlane is one of those people who shorthand, I'd call him my problematic fave, but I very much appreciate how he uses his influence and his connections to drive forward science communication. Like he is very passionate, you can tell, about science and science communication and trying to make the world a safer, healthier place that is able to fight oncoming disasters like climate change. And he's so passionate about it. And I do think he uses his silly Family Guy characters for good. That being said, this is not an endorsement of Family Guy. I
Yeah.
wouldn't do that.
Well, if you want afterwards, I would highly recommend Seth MacFarlane's bit he does on the Graham Norton show where he imitates Kermit the Frog as Liam Neeson's character from Taken.
You're going to watch.
Yes. I don't know who
It's
you
like,
are, but I will find you. Ah. But in another similar vein too, Sesame
mhm,
Street also discussed various other life experiences to help
mhm.
children not only gain a better understanding of various topics, but also instills confidence in them in cases that they might experience something similar. Let's take Sesame Street Workshop Talk, Listen, and Connect series. Talk, Listen, and Connect is a 2006 educational outreach initiative designed to support military families dealing with deployment, homecoming, and major life changes. There were specifically 4 episodes, and I'll go into a little bit background about me. I watched these all, and as a military brat myself, I watched them before and during my dad's deployment in 2006 through 2007, I think 2008 too. He was like
Mhm.
18-month deployment. And
Wow,
I was
that's a
used
long
to it.
time.
Yeah, and I was somewhat used to it because I was a military brat majority of my life and I understood all the responsibilities. There were 4 different episodes, with the first is
Mhm.
about deployment, where Elmo's dad, Louis, is deployed, and Elmo feels nervous and seeing his dad again. And basically, just kind of alluding to something, it's implied that Louis is in the military. He never was wearing a uniform, but it's implied that he's in the military.
I was so curious. I'm like, Louis, where are you stationed?
Yeah, and those are getting into like a little dark thought theory here. His background in those episodes are very nice hotel room type of stuff. So
Oh
I
no.
don't think he's like in barracks. I think he's on secret covert missions,
Oh no.
and he would be,
Louis is part of the CIA.
and his fur is red, so you don't know how many victims he had. Oh God,
Louis done some bad
we even said we shouldn't do dark humor too.
things. It's okay. We're allowed to make fun of a puppet.
Yeah,
Uh,
Louis great too. Um,
Louis, he was great. I really liked that whole I'm calling it a special, that entire like half-hour block of Elmo dealing with his dad's deployment. Because when I do think it was smart to not talk about what his dad did, because if your dad leaves for, say, a business trip or your mom leaves for a business trip, that way you can still, you know, feel those same feelings that Elmo is going through. Um, but I have to say, my absolute favorite part of that episode was not wondering what Louis does for his job. That's none of my business, but it keeps America safe, I'm sure. Um, my favorite part was when they were reunited at the end. That entire section that talked about their being reunited. When Louis said, "I'm coming home," I clearly have watched a lot of very dark television because my heart dropped. I was like, he's not coming home. He's just announced it. That's like saying you're 2 days away from retirement. But then I felt this like wash of relief because I realized, no, this is Sesame Street. They don't do that. If a character's coming home, they're coming home. And so then to see Louis return, and Elma was so overjoyed, but then he doesn't know how to feel
Yep.
because he's been away from his dad for so long. And
And
he's nervous. He doesn't
yeah.
know what to say.
And I'll be honest, I experienced something similar. Like, one of the worst things was my dad's continuous rescheduling of when he's going to be coming home, due to a variety of reasons. And I was used
Yeah.
to it. I was in middle school, I think seventh or eighth grade at the time, and
Yeah.
I was fine with it. But it destroyed my little brother.
Ugh.
It was very difficult at the time, just constantly having our hopes get built up, and then like, oh, he's not coming home yet. Um, but I actually watched these in middle school because my mom really wanted to get my insight on these
Mhm.
episodes. Would they be valuable for younger kids? And I felt that they did represent how I was feeling at the time. I felt nervous, not knowing what was going on, but since I was a bit older, I had a better understanding of what was happening. But I
Mhm.
also felt like I had little control. I will
Yeah.
say it did help build up my confidence to better understand and what I could do in the meantime, like doing various
Mhm.
crafts or spending time with my family. But I will also say it was far less. I feel like, in all honesty, if there was more spontaneous singing, it would have made everything better.
I think, I mean, just based on my one watch and knowing that I was not a military brat, I was raised in the same place my entire life. Um, I think the episode was very well done, but if I could change something, if I could add something, I think they should have included a moment where Louis has to tell Elmo that he thought he was coming home, but isn't, because that seems much more realistic to what a lot of children have to experience.
Yeah, sometimes there are delays in deployment when it comes to the military or
Mhm.
rescheduling due to missions. But we could also see
Mhm.
those, and we didn't watch these other three, but the other three of these episodes were Homecoming, which focuses on
Oh,
Elmo, who faced a difficult transition when his father, Louis, returns from being away.
oh, that's
Changes, which
hard.
this one's the next two are a little bit more. Changes, which focuses on
Mhm.
Rosita, who faces a difficult transition when her father, Ricardo, returns home in a wheelchair.
Oh gosh.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a
A-
big change.
And finally,
Hmm.
when families grieve, which focuses on Elmo, who faces a difficult transition when his uncle Jack passes away. And each one of these kind of really dives into difficult conversations around
Hmm.
um, grief, major changes within your life, and
Hmm.
basically stuff that we kind of alluded to. But the overall goal
Hmm.
is to help instill confidence in children and in their parents to ultimately have these types of discussions or better think about like how they can approach difficult situations. Throughout the
Hmm.
episodes, they introduce actual people who discuss their experiences and how they felt to help legitimize these experiences. In a study by O'Grady et al., they actually looked into these videos and found that caregivers and parents in test groups who watched these videos reported significantly larger increase in comfort discussing the development with their children and stronger
Hmm.
perceptions that the DVDs actually helped children to cope. It doesn't just build up children's confidence,
Hmm.
but also can help reach and improve parents' confidence. In Sherman et al.'s
Hmm.
2018 article, they don't look at the same videos, but they look at different ones. The Sesame Street for Military Families transition episodes, an online program designed to support military parents and their children during transitioning from military life to civilian life, results demonstrated that Participating caregivers found that the program was helpful, reported an increase in self-efficacy in helping their children cope with transitioning from military life to civilian life.
That's such a wonderful resource.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Oh.
that's the big thing about Sesame Street is that in many ways, um, not everybody gets to experience the same thing
Hmm.
or understand like what something is if you try to explain it to them. So what Sesame Street does is show these types of challenging situations to give kids and their family members ideas of how they might approach uh major life events and so they can feel more confident in doing so.
So just throwing this out there. Okay. Obviously, as time passes and our world gets more complicated, what kinds of episodes and what kinds of situations do you think the Sesame Street writers are going to have to create? My personal favorite is helping your children through the alien invasion.
Oh, I was going something that might be more realistic. Like, how does kids ultimately deal with AI in the job market?
Oh, well, that could be something. Actually, this one I'm thinking of, this could be a really interesting concept if it doesn't already exist. How it might feel when one of your classmates is now going by a different name and wants to use different pronouns.
I think there might have been a character like that. Don't quote me on
Yeah.
that. But they do
Mm.
have various characters to help better represent different people. And that was a
Hmm.
major point of Sesame Street is that they wanted to represent people of all different walks of life. They
Yeah.
did, I think it was a couple years ago, introduce a autistic character, an autistic puppet.
Yes.
They don't say where they are on the spectrum, but they do it in a respectful way so people can better
Hmm.
relate to that character.
Yes. I think her name is Julie.
I think so.
Uh, yes. I think I've watched a few clips with Julie, and from what I remember, she seems very cute.
Hmm.
Um, I remember her mostly coloring, and I thought it was lovely that they show how she expresses herself. Um, yeah, I just thought that was quite nice. The gentle way that they introduce this character.
Yeah. And beyond just characters, Sesame Street also introduces a laundry list of videos through the Sesame Street Workshop, teaching various different
Hmm.
life skills or different types of things that people can learn or children can learn, ranging from
Hmm.
financial literacy to writing, spelling, and beyond that, even like how to organize. We did watch the episode, like their little section on financial literacy, where
Hmm.
Sesame Street basically has Cookie Monster's mom talk to Cookie Monster that financial education is about making choices. What were your thoughts about that as a former accountant?
Gosh, I mean, as a former accountant, it's a gross oversimplification of how complex and how difficult it can be for someone who comes from very little money to become financially solvent. My goodness, if Cookie Monster has no cookies and all he wants is one cookie and he finally gets a cookie and cookies are what he needs, then it might be difficult to say, well, why don't you save your cookie for later? It's like, because he needs that cookie right now. He doesn't have the luxury of waiting.
Oh man.
However,
Alexander's basically saying that the Cookie Monster should pull himself up by the bootstraps and get more cookies.
quite the opposite. I think it's unfair of us to expect Cookie Monster to save his cookies when he needs them in that moment. However, if I'm being a little bit, that's trying to think, trying to think of, we're introducing the concept of money to children for the first time, and it is unfortunately very easy to learn bad spending habits.
Yeah.
It's so easy to learn how to be irresponsible with your money, and it's very unfortunate how hard it is to get ahead financially in our society. So I honestly really appreciate that any kind of show, especially Sesame Street, is trying to teach children about the value of saving, of just trying to think of the future. I think that lesson alone of think about your future self is one of the most important lessons that we can teach children.
Exactly. I think that
Mm.
too. I also had I never knew Cookie Monster had a mom too. That was very interesting. So with this in mind, how do we think about like Sesame Street when it comes to media literacy? One thing I do want to point out is that the Joan Gantz Cooney Center did
Mhm.
publish some papers and articles, and one of them is called Digital Play for Global Citizens. And they state about media literacy this: even when kids have complex understandings of how government institutions work, they can't
Mm.
become forces for positive change unless they have access to good data that can be evaluated to make informed decisions. Freedom of information is crucial, and critical media literacy goes along with it. In a connected world, kids have unprecedented access to information. The World Wide
Mhm.
Web puts just about any image or idea a swipe or a click away. But how does grown-ups teach kids to distinguish propaganda from honest reporting, from fake news, from reputable journalism? So when it comes to
Mm.
Sesame Street, they want to instill the confidence or the self-efficacy to help kids become more informed citizens. Sesame Street provides valuable stepping grounds on how to instill confidence not just in kids accomplishing tasks, but in parents and caregivers as well. One big thing I do think is valuable that comes from Sesame Street is that they take a very non-judgmental approach. And when we think
Mhm.
about media literacy, being non-judgmental can really help. When a lot of people ultimately, for the past few years, really try to push journalists to become more fact checkers and really promote fact checking, but fact checking or debunking misinformation isn't always that effective or successful. Previous research from Lee et al. 2021 found that people respond to fact checking messages in a negative way because people view it as an attack on their attitudes, beliefs, and in some cases, their identity. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, just throwing information at people may result in people going more on the defensive. Rather, what I think we can learn from Sesame Street is maybe approaching fact checking or media literacy in a non judgmental way and instilling confidence in people to ask questions about the information they engage with.
Hmm. I like how you phrase that. I like the idea of consistently introducing children to new ideas and not necessarily saying if they're right or wrong, but encouraging children to lead with curiosity.
Yeah,
I think that's a beautiful message. Lead
yeah.
with curiosity.
So, a big thing with our podcast is I always want to try to end with some sort of pragmatic advice. And with that, try not to be judgmental when it comes to media literacy, but try to instill confidence to get people to be skeptical, to check their sources and compare content. But more importantly, help people become reflective about themselves too and how they might experience information. So when it comes to media literacy, the big thing is in this episode, let's promote self-efficacy. Try to instill confidence in people to take those checks in a non-judgmental way.
I think you said that wonderfully.
I'm glad. Now, do you have any advice or any thoughts?
Well, I already think you said that so well, but I agree. Lead with curiosity and also embrace opportunities to spend time with your children and watch their shows.
I think that would be fun. Um, Granted, this is coming from two people who do not have kids.
Yeah, not yet. Not yet.
Okay. Well, I think that's kind of the end and wraps up our full first episode.
Mhm.
What did you think about our first episode? Do you think we have the confidence to keep doing this?
Ooh, I think if you and I can stop ourselves from putting our foot in our mouths then we're gonna do great. But
Okay.
yeah.
Yep. And so thinking about Namely's five themes, we
Mhm.
created
Yes,
and acted upon this, and that's the big goal, to instill confidence and
we did.
act. So with that, I think we should wrap things up. Do you want to end with anything, like any type of saying or anything like that?
Keep it breezy. No.
Keep it.
What I would like to end it with is thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening. And if you have any thoughts, we would love to hear them.
Yep. And check out the Happy Hagfish blog whenever you get the chance. And with that, I'm just thinking of Edward R. Murrow. Good night and good luck.